Okay, so at this point in this episode of Minishots, I have with me Moodz, the homie 616, and Brandon Orlack. Is it Orlack? The second string Jew from the Exploding Heads podcast. And what we're going to do in a little segment I like to call Critique the Critics is we're going to take some reviews that exist on the internet, and then we're going to play them, their audio this time, maybe in the future it'll be written reviews, and then we're going to comment on them. So, as you all know, everybody should know this by now, at the movies, Siskel and Ebert. This was a famous movie review TV show from, I believe it started in the 80s, ran all the way through the 80s, went even into the 2000s, and they had many different hosts. Of course, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, they were writers for the Chicago Sun, I believe, and, you know, they're both dead now. They're very respected critics, but I think what they're most famous for in the horror community is just absolutely shitting on horror films, right, guys?
Oh, yeah, big time.
Yep.
Yeah, so these guys were very well known for not
I
liking
concur.
horror films, and they're, you know, very inconsistent as well, because they, you know, Roger Ebert, I believe, historically gave I Spit on Your Grave like a really good review, and then like would crap on something like what, I don't even know, Hellraiser. And, you know, it didn't really make sense, their review style. They were often contradict things that they said. And these, I got 3 clips here, guys. We have, the first one is Scream. I'll let you guys know that. I picked these at random, so they might actually not even be good. They might, like, give Scream a, like, super good review, and then we're like, yeah.
I'm excited because I have no idea what these are.
I'm looking forward to
I wonder-
destroying these 2 deceased critics.
So do you guys have anything to say about these guys before we go into it? Brandon?
If you have a Gene Siskel review from the 2000s, that's going to freak me out, considering he died in 99. Other than that, let's do it.
And yeah, that was one of the reasons why, you know, there was some, you know, changes on the show because they kept dying.
Yeah, I think they died a few times.
Yeah, well, Siskel died
Like Roger
first.
Ebert looked like he was dead for years while he was.
That
before he
happened
died.
after he made Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, or Return to Valley of the Dolls.
So, what do you think that oftentimes critics are referred to as failed filmmakers? You think there's any truth to that?
Well, I mean, in Roger's case, yeah.
We're just blasting dead people right now.
It's pretty much the epitome of the truth right there. I mean, a lot of critics have come out and said, you know, the reason why, you know, he did what he did was because of his miserable, failed, you know,
film career,
essentially. Yeah. And, you know, I always find it so ironic, the film that, you know, he wrote, you know, and then how he blasted horror films and exploitation films and stuff like that. It just always blew my mind, man. Just always blew my mind what he became. Kind of a hypocrite, right?
Yeah, it's really weird. I mean, I've seen articles, literal articles online, like tearing them apart. I mean, Joe Bob Briggs on the I Spit on Your Grave commentary blasts them. That's a great commentary for anybody who wants to hear Joe Bob go off on Siskel and Ebert. It's fantastic. You guys hear that ever?
I have not heard about that. I've heard of it, though, and I should check that out sometime, though, because dude's hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard it either.
All right, so with that said, let's hop into this first one here. This is 1996, I believe, the Wes Craven film Scream.
Go to a lot of horror movies except for the teenagers who are in horror movies. They've never seen a single one. That's why they always make the same stupid mistakes that always get teenagers killed in horror movies. Wes Craven is a director who has made a lot of slasher films. His credits include Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. And now he's made Scream, a picture about a slasher terrorizing a group of teenagers who are horror movie fans and already know what to do and what not to do. One of the guys works in a video store, and he brings along some tapes to a party, using them as a sort of training session as the slasher stalks the night outside.
Never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, say, "I'll be right back," because you won't be back. I'm getting another beer. You want one? Yeah, sure. I'll be right back.
The mayhem is covered by a gung-ho local TV reporter played by Courtney Cox, who wonders if there's a link between the current killings and the murder of the heroine's mother, which was, well, what do you know, just exactly a year ago today.
They have such a, like, serious, just, like, snarky way of saying everything. Like, what do you know, 1 year ago today? I had to say that. All right.
I'd say the odds are good. Scream is one of those movies where a lot depends on the attitude you take to it. On the one hand, it is a violent and frightening film. The R rating is well-deserved. On the other hand, it's a satire on violent and frightening films, and audiences who have seen a lot of horror movies are probably going to enjoy it more on that level. I have seen lots of horror films, and I did enjoy it because, for once, the teenagers weren't making the same old stupid mistakes. Nope. They were making new stupid mistakes.
Yeah, well, I've seen a lot of horror films too, probably the same exact number as you, and I didn't get into the picture. I don't think it's really as much of a clever satire as you're suggesting, because I think that it starts out as a slasher film and then adds this other material, this knowing material, but you still have to sit there, even if you're hip to the satire, Roger, and watch girls being stalked, ripped apart, and it isn't fun. So the attitude that I brought, which is always central to a picture, was depressed at the 25-minute mark in this film, and I, smiled knowingly at what the film was saying, but I didn't learn anything.
No, Gene, I don't think it starts out as a slasher film. It starts out already as a satire.
Anything?
For example, the use of the big glass patio doors in the background for the telephone call.
Yeah. Well, while you're noticing the glass patio doors being shattered, I'm noticing
the fact that they're there.
Okay, and I'm noticing a body getting shattered, and I'm not going on the high horse against you. I'm just saying.
Yes, you are.
No. I'm saying that's what I found it offensive.
Okay, would you have enjoyed this more if the characters had not been savvy?
No, it would have been a worse picture, but I'm not recommending it.
Okay.
Okay, so
Wow.
the first thing I want to say is sometimes it's so weird with these guys, because sometimes what the fuck? Roger says things that kind of surprise me, because normally I can never predict that guy. He's so inconsistent. But
it was literally the last line that he said. It sounded like he was kind of gonna, recommend the film, and he's like, "Well, I'm not gonna recommend this film."
Yeah.
What the fuck? Like, he just out of the blue just drops that bomb on the audience. It's like, oh, well, I totally thought that you were leaning a different way.
Yeah.
This is why everybody criticizes, Siskel and Ebert, because they say shit like that, like instantaneously, man. Fucking crazy.
Absolutely. But I find that Siskel is just so appalled by the fact that people die in horror movies. He's just like, I seen a body getting did you ever watch? Don't you think Scream is kind of tame for a slasher in terms of violence?
That's incredibly tame. I think so.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean,
Ebert hit it on the head. It's completely satirical. He got it.
Exactly. That's
from
exactly
the opening scene. It doesn't start off as a slasher. It starts off as a satire right away with the phone call.
With the phone call.
I think visually it's not that graphic, really. I think the ideas are there. Mm-hmm. Especially the opening scene with Drew Barrymore and stuff, just the kind of the brutality of that scene, right? But it's not really depicted fully on screen, right? So use your imagination a little bit. On it, right?
And that's the thing. That's what I love about it. We get to see it on screen and use our imagination, so we don't go out and do it in the real world.
Yeah, and I think these guys never understood that. They never once got the idea that horror films are trying to convey. You have to have the murder. You have to have violence.
Yeah, I mean,
the build up. What are you gonna do?
How else am I gonna get off?
That's what the horror is, man. People die in these films. It's inevitable.
Yeah, and
that's why people are there.
For Siskel to say that he does not think that it's that satirical, that it's not that smart in its satire, it is one of the smartest goddamn horror satires ever.
It makes me think that he shut off his brain while he was watching it. Because I don't know how you could sit there and not say that it wasn't satirical and well written, because it is. It's really clever. It honestly is. Even if you don't even care for the film, you have to give credit where credit is due, and at least give it the credit that it is well written.
I mean, there's so many notes. There's so many hidden things that I still recognize. I mean, even down to the character name of Billy Loomis and all the references from the movie. All the movies, there's so many. And I honestly think that one of the most genius fucking things is the scene where Jamie Kennedy is watching Halloween and he's telling Jamie Lee Curtis, calling her by her not character name, but her real name, Jamie behind you. And it's that kind of blows my mind, because his name's Jamie too. You know what I mean? In real life, it's so weird.
Yeah.
And like that is
That just shows its cleverness right there.
Yeah, and you can take that scene and show it to anybody, and like that is like serious writing right there.
You know, I think people kind of overlook the cleverness of Scream because, you know, or you're like, oh, well, that was so obvious, you know, just stating to the viewer all the tropes of a slasher film and things like that. But, you know, to actually sit down and show people that and do it clever is a different thing, right? You're like, oh, I could have wrote that and stuff. You know what? You probably couldn't, motherfucker. It's a lot harder than you think it is.
Kevin Williamson couldn't even write it again because he never really did as well in any of his sequels that he wrote.
That's the thing. Like, I think people just kind of overlook the cleverness because it's too obvious to them. It's ridiculous, man. You know,
And
that's
didn't
what
sacrifice the scariness of the story at
Mhm.
all.
Mhm.
It was still effective.
I was about to give Roger Ebert a little bit of props until he's like, I'm not going to recommend it either. I was like, what?
Just the tone of Siskel too, though. He's just like, you can just hear it in his
He's
tone.
just
like,
so disgusted. He's like, I've probably seen as many horror movies as you.
Oh yeah, because you know, fuck.
Why
Right.
keep watching horror films if you're just gonna bash each and every single one?
Well,
I think
it's their job, but
then again, it was their job. I always wanted to know if they had total control over the films that they reviewed on the show, or it was just kind of a set thing. Okay, these are the films you're going to be doing this week, you know, because they obviously viewed a shitload more films than the ones that just reviewed on the show, right?
yeah.
So is this what it was? Like, okay, you have to do Scream this week, or you have to do this film. I always wondered that because, you know, some shows you'd watch and they thumbs down every movie.
Yeah,
it was just kind of a total downer
they usually
episode.
watch like 4 movies, and if you think about it, every week, I mean, in the 80s there was so many movies coming out, but like in that era, the 90s, like were there really that many movies coming out each week? So maybe they were seeing like everything.
It is tough being a critic. I did study film critique, and I did study at NYU for that, and you do become a little bit cynical towards your reviews sometimes because you're watching a lot of movies, sometimes 3-4 movies a day.
That's understandable.
But at the same time, these guys, like Ebert just was giving a good, solid review, was about to recommend it, and then became, from an objective reviewer, became a subjective reviewer and just said, no, I don't like horror movies, so I'm not recommending it.
Yeah, and cynical is actually a good word for them.
Big time.
Well, one of the things, you know, that he says is, you know, instead of watching a horror movie where, you know, dumb kids are making dumb mistakes or whatever, now we get to see them make a whole bunch of new dumb mistakes. Like, even, like, in that, he's kind of being a dick.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? If they make all the right choices, there's no movie.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
You know, it kind of pisses me off when you hear a review like that. Like, you can hear Siskel just, you know, his disgust in the review, and it's just instantly you can see how it influenced Ebert.
Yeah,
in an instant. Like, that's just so nasty because
he even brings it up, like, you know, I'm not trying to high horse you or whatever, but you know that's what Roger Ebert was thinking at the time, because he doesn't want to be like, well, I'm not the one that's like in horror films. What the hell?
I just be like, every time you're having one of those arguments, to be like, well, you wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, man.
Yeah. All right, so let's go into the next one. Does anybody want to take a guess what it is?
Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Nope, it's Scream 2.
Thanks. I was going to take a guess.
Sorry about that.
I was actually going to say Scream 3.
Oh.
No.
You would have been slightly off.
No,
but close. All right, let's play this one.
Last year's movie Scream was a horror film with a difference. All of the characters had seen other horror films and knew enough to avoid all the dumb things that people do in horror films.
I think he
now
just
comes
contradicted
Scream
himself.
2, in which all of the characters have seen a movie based on the killings in the first movie. It sounds complicated, but as part of the fun, the cast for once knows as much as the audience. The film stars Neve Campbell as one of the survivors, and now she's in college and getting creepy phone calls from another mad slasher. Courtney Cox plays the TV newswoman from the first movie. She wrote a book about those killings and now is back to cover more slashings with a reluctant cameraman played by Dwayne Martin.
I read what happened to your last cameraman. The guy got gutted. Now me, I'm going to do what any rational human being would do, which is get out of here.
First of all, he wasn't gutted. I made that up. His throat was slashed.
Gail, gutted, slashed. The guy ain't in the union no more.
This is national television. Think about it. This is a big chance for you. The story is monumental. Don't you want to be a part of that?
I want to report the news. I don't want to be the news. Besides, brothers don't last long in situations like this.
Liev Schreiber is also back as the suspect that Campbell put in jail before his innocence was proven. Now he's suspected again.
Don't you watch TV, Current Edition? That was a very insightful program on which it was made abundantly clear that I'm an innocent man. So until you find me standing over a dead body with a knife in my hand, I think you better treat me with the rights and privileges accorded to every innocent citizen in this country.
There's a good deal of violence in Scream 2. It's bloodier than the original film, but the screenplay by Kevin Williamson is just as clever at devising dialogue that plays against it. This is not only a horror movie that knows it's a horror movie, but it's a sequel that contains a discussion of sequels. Is this as good as the original? Well, not quite, but it's close enough. I'm giving it a thumbs up.
I'm giving it a thumbs up too,
What
and
the
I
fuck?
liked it more than the original picture. Maybe the challenge of coming up with a sequel to that one is daunting, and this film pulls it off. I just thought that the writing was smarter, and the number of characters that are being juggled in this screenplay. I mean, normally you have a row of ducks that get knocked off in these pictures, and here I got to know some of the ducks.
Kevin Williamson's screenplay does have a lot of really neat lines in it.
Sure,
For example,
it does.
at
A lot
one
of
point,
topical
the
references.
Courtney Cox character is accused of posing nude on the internet. In her defense, that was my head. It was Jennifer Aniston's body.
Right.
That's a funny line.
Better than Minute Lice, Roger. I like that one.
That doesn't it sound
Wow.
like that should have been the review for the first film?
Yeah, that surprised me, man.
Because they say that it's like, it's way more smart, What?
They just said everything. They just said everything that they should have said
in the first
for
film.
the first film. For the first film. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's so bizarre.
And they
It is
said this
bizarre.
one was bloodier, yet Siskel still liked it.
Maybe it's because they, after seeing the second one, they realized how good the first one was, and this is their way of kind of making up for their mistakes.
Which is
of the first review.
completely like a biased way of critiquing.
But doesn't it seem like that just happened though?
Yeah,
Like,
it
Siskel
does
was
seem
a
like
little
it.
more.
It's like they probably got
up-tempo.
a bunch of backlash for hating the first one.
Yeah, he was a little more up tempo, and he was so quick and eager to agree with Ebert, and yeah, that was interesting.
They're literally the same film, except for the first one's better. So that review made no sense to me. It makes no sense to me how you can like Scream, especially when he said, they're juggling all these characters, and I got to know some of these ducks before they got knocked off. No, I don't
That
even
doesn't-
remember any characters
No.
besides the main ones.
That completely doesn't make sense at all. The characters are way more developed and even more memorable in the first film
one.
than
Yeah,
they are in the second film.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's very odd. In such a short review, that's such an odd thing to point out.
You know what? Speaking of pointing out things, I always find it weird what they point out when they do their little preview. Like the cameraman doesn't really have unless my memory is doing me wrong, but I don't remember the cameraman being that big of a character. And even Cotton, whatever his name is, Cotton Weary or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't remember him being that important in this one. They point out those two plot lines as when they're describing the movie. It's kind of weird.
yeah, that is weird.
I don't
But-
remember part 2 that well, actually.
Yeah, part 2 is a little rusty in my memory, but I know for goddamn sure it's nowhere near as good as the first one
No.
at all.
Yeah, I remember, walking out of the theater and saying, it was very similar to the first film, but just not as good. And I distinctly remember saying that. Talking about it right now, yeah, I'd have to watch that movie again. I don't remember it too well either.
They
be
sound
honest,
like they're
but-
trying to save face for bashing the first one
Yeah,
and
man.
it being such a huge success. So they're like, you know what? We're not going to piss off the fans anymore. We're just going to give this one a positive review.
That's
that's-
exactly what they're doing.
It's
Yeah.
a good point. It's a good point because, they reviewed the film before the success of Scream.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
because these reviews usually came out before. I think they were press screenings, right?
Oh, big
Yeah,
time.
definitely.
Big time. So then Scream blew up, and obviously, it was big enough to make a sequel right away. They were making up for faults for sure.
Yeah, I
That was
remember-
that was like a pity review. Oh yeah, I'm surprised they didn't even throw some. Well, the original isn't that bad.
that's
Type shit.
that's the one thing I always find interesting about their reviews is they'll bash a film, or at least Roger Ebert will, a film like Full Metal Jacket, and then it'll go on to be this amazing movie that everybody respects and loves. but he had to review it before that happened, so like he looks like an idiot afterwards.
Yeah.
Well, he went back and he said that the characters were smart enough not to make stupid decisions in the first one. Yet in the first review, he said they were smart enough not to make stupid decisions. Old decisions. They made stupid new decisions.
Yeah, and
So
I didn't get that either. That's
when you
what I
said he
kinda-
contradicted himself.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
he basically
that did.
That's a good point, man. I was trying to word that in my mind too. And
I don't even know what I just said. I don't know if it
No,
worded
I
correctly,
think it worked.
but
I think you got
you
it.
worded it perfectly enough that I understood that completely.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I was thinking too. I was like, there's something about yeah. That's a good point.
yeah.
Totally. Contradiction at its best.
Okay, so far after 2 reviews, I think we have pointed out that the rumor, the myth is true about these guys, that they do contradict themselves and they are inconsistent with their horror reviews. Obviously they've praised many good films like Your Godfathers and things like that, but I always find their reviews on horror movies particularly interesting because I think they're just completely inconsistent.
Well, and I also think that their horror film reviews are a little biased too because they're not fans of horror films.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think
It's not even that they're not fans of horror films. They genuinely don't like them.
Yeah, and that definitely plays into the review.
Yeah, and they almost
They're being a little biased.
they
on
almost
personal
insult
bias.
the very fact that they're watching a horror film.
Yeah,
They're
I
like,
think they look down on the viewers who do watch horror. It's almost
Yeah.
as if you're watching horror films, you're watching it to be titillated, when in fact that's completely far from why you're watching a movie.
I
You know,
mean,
we're not
like-
watching this to, get off on. We're watching this, because we want to be scared. We want to, experience fear and comedy in some cases and all these different feelings. But
yeah.
The
in
films
this
that
case,
they
they just look at us like perverts.
I
the
think-
films that they love and respect and give good reviews to are like those. They're like those suburb films, and the people that love the horror films are considered like those inner city films.
Yeah. And meanwhile, he makes his one film is an X-rated bad exploitation.
That's why I could never take Roger Ebert serious based on that alone, and it's so strange to me.
Yeah.
It's just so strange. I mean, if you didn't have that background, the conversation would be a little different, but like, it's hard to overlook, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
It's very strange.
Earlier in the beginning of the recording, I think I mentioned that Roger Ebert historically gave a bad review or a positive review to I Spit on Your Grave. I think it was the other way around. He gave a positive review to Last House on the Left, but a negative review to I Spit on Your Grave.
They both hated I Spit on Your Grave.
Which makes no sense to me because
They both said it was the worst movie of
ever.
What year did that come out? 1980?
70,
70,
78,
78,
77. Not sure, 79. But anyway, I think it's silly because me and Moodz have reviewed Last House on the Left, and that film is completely flawed. And I Spit on Your Grave is the same film, yet better.
Yeah, it just means they just like their rape a certain way.
They like their rape with a comedic turn afterwards.
Yeah, like David Hess provided in Last House.
All right, so we got one more review here, and I think this is going to be the best one because I do remember hearing this one before and it made me angry. So let's play this one.
Next is the movie Psycho 2. It's 22 years later, and Anthony Perkins is back at the Bates Motel again as the most famous mad slasher in movie history.
Something wrong, Norman?
Okay, now this next movie we have is one that no true movie buff or lover believes could ever really be made. The name of the movie is Psycho 2, and this movie has the presumption to believe that Sir Alfred Hitchcock didn't finish his story with the original Psycho back in 1960. Well, I walked into this movie with a certain amount of resistance just to the idea of any movie called Psycho 2 because I admire the original Psycho so much. But the opening half hour of the movie is sort of creepy because it reminds us so convincingly of Norman Bates, played by Anthony Perkins, and of the violent events at the Bates Motel. Look at this scene from early in the film. Anthony Perkins hardly seems to have changed at all since 1960.
Norman! What did you put in my tea? I'm gonna get you for this, Norman! I'm gonna show you what happens to bad little boys who poison their mothers! I'm gonna kill you!
That scene is a direct reference back to the original Psycho. Later in this movie, Bates offers shelter to a young girl who triggers his old phobias.
This is yours.
No, go ahead. You have it. I'll make myself another.
Do you have a knife?
No, I'm afraid. I don't. I just moved back here after being many years away. I forgot to bring any cutlery.
That's odd. People usually leave something, even if it is only an old butter knife. Ah, there. Something wrong, Norman? Aren't you going to eat?
No, I just suddenly lost my appetite. But you go ahead. Enjoy it.
Now, there's one question you have to ask yourself. Will an audience that isn't familiar with the original Psycho get the same kind of charge out of that knife scene that we do?
Yes, I think I like the sound effect of the knife scraping on the plate. That was
it
nice.
means a little more of, what Norman Bates has been up to
A little more.
earlier in his life.
A little more.
There's one thing Norman Bates should have learned during his 2 decades of psychiatric treatment is that he never, ever should have gone back inside that house again. But he does. And then another series of murders breaks out, and Norman thinks he's going crazy, which is a little ironic. Psycho 2 isn't a bad movie, but it's not really a worthy sequel to Psycho either. I suggest that the best way to enjoy this movie would be to try to put the original Psycho just totally out of your mind. But the problem is the very first opening scene of Psycho makes that impossible, because what they do is repeat Hitchcock's shower scene, and by letting Sir Alfred have the first word, they let him have the last word too.
Yeah, this is a tricky film. I think audiences would generally enjoy it, but I'm going to make my comments on grading, if you will, reviewing this specific movie. And it does nothing extra than the original film did. What I like about sequels that are good, like Godfather 2 or Rocky 2 or even Superman 2, is that they take the characters into new places. This is basically a retread with sort of a wink at the audience, and it's played as much for laughs as it is for horror. I just don't think it was anything special. We don't need this movie.
I think, well, first of all, that's right. And then secondly, do you think it would have been more interesting to have Norman Bates go out into real society, move to San Francisco and Denver or something?
Yeah.
Try to get involved in things.
I think the ghost of the original obviously hangs over this production, and it's too bad, because it's a nicely made picture.
Nicely made, but you're quite right, it's unnecessary.
We copy. Okay, now to recap our reaction to the 4 films on this show. Roger and I split on Steve Martin's The Man with Two Brains, Roger finding Martin's humor sort of self-involved. I disagree. I thought he was terrifically silly. We agreed that Superman 3 is the weakest of the 3 Superman movies. Neither one of us can recommend you see it. We both thought that Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd were very funny in Trading Places. I think it's the funniest film of the year so far. And finally, awesome. 2 downturned thumbs for Psycho 2, a well-made but weak carbon copy of the great Alfred Hitchcock thriller.
Oh, man. First of all, I want to say, he said
Christ.
One of the things he likes about sequels, great sequels like Godfather 2 and Rocky 2, is you get to see the characters in new situations or something. And I was like, it's the fucking Rocky 2 is the same thing. What difference happens in Rocky 2?
Nothing, man.
He wins.
It's just, that's the only difference.
That's
it's the same. It's literally just an extension of the first movie.
Yeah.
What a sequel's supposed to be.
Exactly.
Like, one thing that really bugged me is he said, why couldn't we see Norman Bates in San Francisco or something? Dude, you know damn well they would have been like, if they would have did that, Ebert would be like, "Oh, it's gimmicky, and it does not feel anything like the original Psycho, the classic."
It doesn't make any
Psycho,
and it doesn't make any fucking sense. He just spent 22 years locked up in a fucking nut house.
It's all he knows. All he knows is his home. What the fuck else does he know?
Because he doesn't have the fucking money to move to San Francisco. First of all, so right there, if that was the storyline, that would make no sense. Where did he get all this money to move to the big city of Frisco?
And more importantly, why? Why the hell would he go to San Francisco?
Doesn't make sense.
Did you notice the first thing that Ebert said, though? Is that he went into the movie biased, just based on the title alone. Yep. Before he even sat down to watch it, he had a chip on his shoulder about it.
I thought that was a very interesting...
Very telling.
Very interesting way to start off a review, saying he was biased. So he's being honest, And this is no way of approaching. Like, I think we've all learned our lessons, right? You know, watching sequels, and you kind of have these pre-notions, these pre-biased opinions and stuff that should be making a sequel, blah blah blah. He actually fully admitted that. That's ridiculous, but we know that is not the way to go into a sequel. And I'm sure back in 1982 when this movie came out, I bet you if you took a poll, I bet you 90%, 95% of the people were not looking forward to the sequel.
And I would have been one of them, because I would be like, how can you touch Alfred Hitchcock's classic?
That's
one of the best films ever made. But guess what, dude? Norman Bates' performance, I can't believe they criticized the fact that it feels right like Psycho when it starts. They're like, the best way to watch this is to put it out of your head that it's a sequel. But you can't do that because the opening scene makes it feel like Psycho. And I'm like, is that what the fuck does that even mean? Are you serious? The opening scene makes it feel like Psycho. So you're saying that it shouldn't feel like Psycho. Yeah,
exactly.
That's the number one thing you want to capture making a sequel 20 fucking years later.
It was just
the feeling.
That line was just a prelude to say that, Hitchcock getting, the first laugh gets the last laugh. That was just all a clever setup just to use that line right there, in my opinion. But I don't know, man. He did make one reference to Anthony Perkins looking the same 22 years later. He fucking does.
Dude, it's like
kind of ageless.
It's like he just stepped right back into the old shoes of Norman Bates. And honestly, one of the things that I love about Psycho 2, and I do love it, it's one of my favorite sequels ever,
Me too,
is
man.
that Anthony Perkins not only feels like the same Norman Bates, no, he doesn't. He feels like a Norman Bates who's been through 20 years of, being incarcerated in some sort of mental health facility.
Yeah,
he carries that weight with him. Being rehabilitated. And that's another key word there. It does feel like he's been rehabilitated. And I think
that's why it works
making the film, the way that they wrote the script to kind of make Norman sort of not know what the hell's going on. Is he going crazy? He doesn't know. I thought it was brilliant. It seriously is such a good movie. And these people wanted to hate it before they even saw it. And then when they saw some things that they liked, they didn't want to really admit it. 2 thumbs down. Come on.
Yeah, it's really the perfect script and idea for that movie, because after 22 years of being rehabilitated, I mean, honestly, you've been in the nut house for so long, you're probably comfortable. You get out, you might start questioning your sanity a little bit, when things aren't...
you're institutionalized at that point.
Exactly, because you're comfortable and now you're in a different place again. You're in an old but, new place. And... yeah, you might start questioning things. Exactly. And you might start to question certain things in your what's going on around you. I think it's a perfect setup.
I mean, the one biggest critique that you could probably give this film is the fact that Norman Bates was let out after 20 years, 22 years, killing that many people. I mean, it is, I mean, I'm sure people have been released on murders after that, but I mean, that would have been a more fair critique to say that it's a plot hole or something, but I think it's viable, man. I think that really does happen. Because he's sent to the nut house for a purpose, to be rehabilitated, and because they actually deemed him crazy. It's different. Like if you went to jail and you're out in 22 years after killing that many people, then that wouldn't make any sense, because it's probably illogical to think that someone could actually ever get out of jail, for killing that many people after 22 years. I mean, that's not even 25. And I do like that they pointed out the tension of that scene with the knife, right? I mean, the performance that Anthony Perkins gives in Psycho 2, where
he's so good, man.
The way he even enunciates words, where I forget what the exact words were, cutlery or whatever. I can't even repeat it, but he emphasizes these violent words, and he even did it when he said something about scared or something like that. It's such a masterful performance, both in the original Psycho and all the rest of them by Anthony Perkins. I mean, that is literally one of my favorite characters of all time. I can't believe that
I could sense part of their negative review is because of how well Anthony Perkins plays Norman Bates. I mean, he really was a terrific actor.
Oh, fuck yeah, he really was, man.
And he might be better than the sequels themselves, but that's no reason to bash them.
Yeah.
I can see a little more argument for Psycho 3 and Psycho 4.
I could argue Psycho 3. I could argue, about that film all day long, because I really, really like that film. I like the fact that he took over the directorial duties to that film, but there's a lot of really interesting transitions and a lot of like metaphorical things and things that are going on in that film that he put in there that I didn't even really notice until I watched the documentary, The Psycho Legacy. And then they were pointing out things and I'm like, fuck me, man. Anthony Perkins is, quite talented. He doesn't get any credit
in more ways than one.
I never knew, like, and so after I watched Psycho Legacy, I popped in part 3 and I've started to notice what they had pointed out and, some other things. I was like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, this movie's so much better than people give it credit for. That's how good it was. So
I love all the Psychos, and just those guys. I think that pretty much we can do this all day and point out every flaw in their review because they are biased as hell when it comes to horror. Like, they wanted to hate this movie, and you can tell.
Yeah,
you can just feel it. Yeah. It annoys me. It always has annoyed me.
It's one of those reviews where it's one of those how dare you reviews.
Yeah.
How dare you make a sequel to a classic film done by Sir Hitchcock? It's like, come on, man.
Which wouldn't even surprise me if they didn't even like when it came out.
Yeah, exactly. That's too bad it wasn't around, or the show wasn't around when Psycho came out. I would love to hear their opinions on that and been like, all of a sudden 20 years later, it's like, well, fuck, man. Like, we gave that shit 2 thumbs down. How the fuck are you going to kill the main character off halfway through the film? That makes no sense. Yeah. That is not structured cinema.
Yeah, and, a callback to Scream. I'm surprised I didn't hear them mention that. They probably went right over their head that was a nice nod to Sir Alfred Hitchcock in Scream.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I think Siskel was probably sleeping through those. It sounded like he was sleeping through the first, or through the films anyways. So it's like, well, whatever. Not going to catch
these guys. These guys, and honestly, they are beloved reviewers. I mean, they pretty much. They have done so much good stuff in terms of just letting people know about movies, having people think about movies differently. I've heard them point out very good things about filmmaking, even growing up when I seen some of these at the movies and stuff. But, they're biased as hell when it comes to horror. It's just a fact.
Big time, yeah. And I know we've on the podcast we've talked a lot of ill shit about Roger Ebert, and not so much Siskel, but Ebert seems to be more the the limelight guy, and I took it upon myself to learn more about him, and I watched a documentary, Life Itself, and man, he was a pretty interesting guy, man. He did a lot. And I do respect for, what he did for not only the city of Chicago, but for film critics in general. Kind of making it, kind of a staple, position in reality, like there wasn't really, like, he was kind of like the first big one, he kind of set the stage for everyone else. And, he obviously had a very sad end, but, I learned a lot about him, and, it's just too bad that he was that biased towards, horror films and exploitation and things like that.
Snobbish.
Anything to do with any type of, like, you just don't want to give it, that correct review.
Not even the time of day, man.
There's a time and a place for it, and you have to kind of separate yourself as a critic. And sometimes it is hard. Like I'm sure all three of us have those times where
I've been biased before. I've had shit be overhyped, and I always try to improve it.
It's human nature. I mean, I give 5 out of 10 to Dark Hollow one time. I don't know what the fuck I'm thinking with, Brandon's given 0 out of 10.
It happens, but it's funny to listen to these 3 reviews and they're not really bashing the movie so much.
Sometimes they're just even praising them, and then they're like, we didn't like them.
They're almost halfway decent reviews of the films, but the fact that they don't like the genre, they can't recommend them.
Yeah, it's so weird, man.
Although they did tell us what the anti-aging secret was for Anthony Perkins. It is an AIDS cocktail.
Yeah, that was
one a night or one a week.
So, yeah, I mean, we don't hate Siskel and Ebert.
No,
I actually enjoy watching their reviews.
And I don't hate people with AIDS. I love AIDS.
I just find, the biggest issue I have with them reviewing horror films is exactly what was just stated by both you guys. They're pointing out a lot of good things, and then ultimately it comes down to the end and they're like, thumbs down. Yep. It's like, just be real. And I mean, if you really don't like the film and you don't like the writing, like the characters, put a little more emphasis or focus on the things you're not liking too. If you're just going to give a thumbs down at the end, don't.
Well, that's your typical review where you're like, where somebody's like, that movie sucks. And you're like, why? And then they're like, because it's bad. And you're like, why is it bad? And they're like, well, because the one scene where it's all intense and stuff, it's bad. afterwards.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? So you point out something good, and yet you still say it's bad.
I just find that so misleading, though. It's Roger Ebert says pretty much mostly good things about Scream, and then he's like, I can't recommend this. It's like, well, you just got influenced by Siskel, or you just being retarded.
I'll do that sometimes, where I'll be like, I like this. Like,
did you just lose your train of thought and forget what film you were reviewing? Like, I mean, come on, man, just be real. Just be real. And I think that's a big problem with reviewers and critics and stuff. And I'm sure we're all the victim of it once in a while. But, I mean, just you gotta be real, man. Like, if you don't like a film, fucking state it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So I think that kind of wraps it up on this little segment here. I had fun with this, critiquing the critics. If I'm sure we can bring this back at some time or place. If anybody out there listening, would like to suggest reviews, either written, maybe IMDb or Siskel and Ebert or anybody really, for us to discuss, drop us a line.